It's really a great pleasure for me to have this opportunity to participate in the African Economic Conference. This is my fourth time in Nigeria, the first time to Abuja. I would like to thank the African Development Bank for their very kind invitation. And what I thought I would do this morning is to take a few minutes to tell you about some work that I've been doing about and income inequality in developing countries. And as you will see, this has quite a lot to do with agriculture. We have been going through an intense period of globalization in the last 20 or 30 years. And globalization has brought with it many benefits. Developing countries like China, India, and a number of African countries have seen dramatic income as a result of globalization. But globalization has also brought with it some difficulties. In particular, it has led to an increase, a fairly dramatic increase in inequality in a number of developing countries. China, India, and a number of African countries are examples of this as well. Is that exactly the opposite should have happened. Developing countries are rich in unskilled labor. And when a country embarks in international trade, it tends to specialize in goods which make use of skilled labor. It's going to concentrate on goods that make a lot of use of unskilled labor, and that will be good for the unskilled workers because they will be in greater demand, they will see their wages rise, and as a result we can expect inequality to decrease. That at least is the theory, and that is what's in the last 20 or 30 years. Instead, we saw an increase in inequality. And the question is, why? What is wrong with the theory of comparative advantage? And that's where what we try to argue is that this particular globalization is different from earlier globalizations in that it's not only goods and services which are being traded across international boundaries, but the production process itself. Computers might be designed in North America and programmed in Europe and assembled in China. The very process itself is international, and that means that the labor market itself grows as a result of this process. Well, that's our diagnosis of what has happened in the last are more fairly distributed, that they're not just going to people at the top, but also to people at the bottom. And the way to ensure a fairer distribution, we would bottom so that they get employment opportunities as well. This involves an investment in education. This involves an investment in modern skills. Of course, education and skill training are expensive, and the question arises, who is going to pay for them? Of course, they themselves. Of course, they would love to be able to do it, but they don't have the resources. You might say their employers should invest in training their workers. But as we see, employers don't always have sufficient incentive to make these investments. If I'm an unskilled worker and you're a potential would take one of your jobs, But then once I'm trained, I don't have to work for you. I could go and work for your competitor, in which case the investment that you've made in me is lost. And so that means that you may not have sufficient incentive to train me. That suggests that requires some outside party, some third party, such as government. Government needs to get involved in skill training and education. And here I'm thinking particularly of skill training and education in the agricultural area, because by, for example, giving subsidies to companies that are willing to train unskilled workers and give them training in modern techniques. You might say, well, how is human capital? And so, yes, there are other priorities too, but skill development should be the top priority. Well, that's very briefly the sort of work that I've been trying to do, and as I say, it's not a message at all. Rather, it's a message which says that globalization is a force which should be enjoyed by everybody, not just the people at the top. Let the fruits of globalization be shared equally.